everybody. My name is John Reid, and I'm coming to you from my home in San Jose, California. I was originally supposed to give this talk back in March when I was in Amsterdam, and it's really too bad that COVID came and hit, disrupted the meetup, and I had to hop a plane and get out of there and get back to the US, which is too bad. I'd like to come someday again to meet the folks that I never got a chance to meet. I did meet some of you in the companies that brought me out in January and March to do teaching and coaching. Someday again, right? In the meantime, here we are. This is a recording. This is not live, but a couple reasons for that. One is that I wanted to remove any possibility of network problems transmitting from California all the way to the Netherlands. That's one thing. Another thing is that this gives me a chance to actually interact in the chats and deal with your questions live. So I'm over in the chat section right now. See? So I'm around to answer questions and interact with your comments as we go and talk about refactoring, which is what I am here to talk about. Oh, I forgot. Let's start with a book plug. My book, iOS Unit Testing by Example, is finally done and available. Real briefly, the book is in 3 parts. Part 1 deals with XE-test basics, and there's some subtleties around unit testing that you may not have thought of. And so that's part 1. Part 2 deals with iOS testing tips and techniques. So that's, the nitty-gritty. How do you test something in iOS? You might think that would be the end of the book right there. But actually, there's a part 3. And part 3 is almost entirely about refactoring. Why is that? I think that refactoring is one of the most important disciplines in terms of being able to be agile, to do agile software delivery. And there's a lot of confusion about it in the software industry as a whole. Folks say, I'm going to go refactor this thing, and actually they're just changing stuff around, or they're actually changing the behavior. Refactoring comes from this book. Where is it? There it is. By Martin Fowler. The subtitle is Improving the Design of Existing Code. And it's very important that it's about not changing the behavior. It's changing the code without changing the behavior. I'm not going to get into the details of the book. In my book, I reference specific examples from this, specific named refactorings, and go into a lot of detail. We're not going to do that today. Don't have time. Let's get into our example. For my example, in my background, I used to work at eBay. And I don't know about now, but back then there were regular items and there were sale items. Let's show you, and these are actual items that did sell on eBay at one point. For a regular item example, we have cornflake shaped like the state of Illinois. Illinois is a state in the center of the United States. This is where Chicago would be, and this is a small dime, 10 cents. For contrast, or for size example, and it sold for this ridiculous price. This is a regular item. A sale item would be like we have, 200 watches, and they're all going to be on special sale, limited time, and a discount. And for that, it would do something more like, well, it wasn't a Dorito shaped like the Pope's hat. This did sell on eBay for over €1,000, but it would be something like this, where we would have a title, an image, the original price with a strike through in it so that it entices you to say, whoa, look at that discount. I can get it for only €1,012. Fantastic. And a clear button. So anyway, this is what I'm going to refactor. We're not going to finish it, but let's start it. Over in the view controller, you'll see we have a few outlets: title, image, current price, strike-through price. And all these are set based on a property, the item, which is set from the outside to say, show this item, basically. And it has a did set responder when it's, and surprisingly complex in here. There's a lot going on. And, I took this actual idea of code from actual code that had a lot more complexity to it. But if the item is nil, then it does this bottom part in the else of just setting various properties in the outlets to nil. Otherwise, we're up here where it's like, well, if there is an item, then we set the title, we set the image, we set the current price, but then things change around whether or not it's a sale item. It's on sale if there is a savings rate greater than 0. And if so, we set strike-through text. I just slapped currency in here. Don't ever do that for real. This is just a quick example. Use actual currency conversion. But anyway, it sets the strike-through text and it determines whether or not that strike-through price label is hidden or not. Okay? All this is covered by some tests. Let me give the tests a run. I am using app code. App code is really more powerful than Xcode in terms of its refactoring abilities. I also prefer it for running tests. You can see if you want to look at it. Oh, you can play with this on your own, by the way. I'll put the code up. You can see the 10 tests that we have and the various things that it examines. But let's start. What I want to do is start pulling this nasty mess out into a view model. In my book, I take a different example and we do model view presenter and then model view model. But here, let's just do MVVM. So to start with, what I want you to keep track of while I do this in the short time that remains is how many times I run tests, okay? So the first run was just to see that we're green. Refactoring, you should always start in green and end in green and not go through red. So what we want, let me back up. What we want is when the item is set, we're not going to change this interface because we don't want to touch it from the out, change how other things interact with it. When this is set, we want it to jam this into a view model. Let me first make a view model out here. Private. And we'll call it item view model. And it doesn't exist. We have a choice of where to create it. I'm going to, instead of putting it in a different file, which I normally would, I'm just going to keep it in this file just for simplicity of this presentation. We'll make it a struct. Let's make it private. And let's see if this, did I break it? Does this still work? And the answer is I did break things. Let's fix that. The view model is going to be that. Okay, so we've run tests now, or tried to run tests before. It failed with a compilation failure. Here we are. We're back to green. So you might dip into red for refactoring, but get out as soon as you can. All right. Now we want to move some stuff over. What we want is to say, when the item is set, let's actually set that on the view model. So we say viewModel.item equals item. This doesn't exist. That's okay. We'll we'll make it exist. And this will be, what is, oh, yeah, item. Does this still build? Sometimes I don't know. Seems to be working. All right. So when the item is set, it's going to set it, set on the view controller. It's going to just pass it right to the view model. And then we want to get these other things from the view model. Let's start with the title label. The way, a basic pattern of refactoring that comes throughout the book in every refactoring example is to a pattern that some call expand, shift, and contract. What we do is I think of it in terms of we lay down the new thing, even though nothing is calling it yet. And then we start shifting stuff to call the new thing. And then we get rid of the old thing and we clean it up. So let's do that. I want to essentially set this title label text from the view model. This is a optional string. So let's add a property, a computed property. Call it title. And we'll just see if this still compiles in case anything is angry. Apparently fine. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down the new stuff by copying all of this and slapping it in here and getting rid of anything that's not related to title. So everything from here on down and here on down. And then instead of setting title label, we're going to return this or that. You know, I don't really need to run tests. I just should build to see. That's part of the process. This counts. If you're keeping count of how many times I'm doing this, that counts. That builds. So now let's try to shift this over one at a time. Instead of setting it the title label text from the item title, let's set it from the view model title and see if this works by running tests. Okay, that's successful. And then down here, same thing. Run tests again. Success. So now we can do some refactoring. Well, I am refactoring, but we can do some cleaning up of the change we've made. Now the work is being done in the view model, but we have duplication between here and here. So we can pull this up and out of the conditional. This is another refactoring pattern, is to take two parts that look different and make them the same so that you can get rid of the conditional. And let's run tests again. Okay. So that cleans up the did set in here. Now let's clean up the stuff in here. This can be simpler because instead of having the conditional, we can say, well, return the item title. App code handily adds the conditional there. Let's just sort of comment that out in case we made a mistake. This is also a technique I use, is like, let's just try for a bit to see if it comes back, and or to see if we need to get the old code back. Let's just comment it out for temporarily. So let's run tests. Okay, it's good. So I can get rid of that. And then app code is suggesting already by the fact that the return is grayed out that it's redundant. So I can say remove the redundant return. Let's join these and do some reformatting to simplify it. Great. We moved one thing from the view controller into the view model. We can do this again. Let's see, what's next? So we're doing title label, image view. Image is an optional UI image, so let's create that. We'll call it image, which is an optional UI image that returns nil. And this counts. Remember, I'm building. You don't always have to run tests if you just do the first part of laying down the new thing that nothing is calling yet. Now, once again, going to copy the old code, slap it into the new place, get rid of anything unrelated to the image view. Oops. Change it to return the values instead of trying to set something. See if this builds. Okay. And then we can now we've expand, shift, contract. We've put down the new thing. Now we're going to shift each caller one by one from the old thing to the new thing, and then that should leave us in a good state. So item view dot image, instead of item image, this is going to be the view model image run tests. Shift and run tests. Here we go. Same thing here. View model dot image, shift, and run tests. And then now we've taken these two lines that were different and we've made them the same. So now we can pull it out of the conditional and run tests. You starting to get the idea here? And that cleans up the did set. You see, this is starting to shrink in here. Okay, this still has this complexity. We can do the same thing that we did before, which is to say, return the item dot image and have app code handily add the question mark there. I'm going to be a little bolder and get rid of this. I'm a lot more confident that this is just going to work. Run tests. And now that it's down to a one-liner, we can get rid of the return, join it, fix up the formatting, and run tests again. I think we have time for one more. Let's do one more. I'm not going to be able to finish the whole thing, but let's now do the current price label, because this is going to be a little different from the other ones. The text here is an optional string. So this will be var current price. Build. Okay. And now let's do the same trick. I'm going to copy that whole block, slap it in here, get rid of anything that's not dealing with current price. We've seen this now a few times, but it's going to end up a little different this time. See if this builds. So we've laid down the new thing, but I want to make sure it still builds, because sometimes it's like I need to, change something in the initializer. Okay, so now we can say this is going to be view model current price run tests. Good. And this also, view model, current price, run tests. Cool. And now to clean this up, again, these are the same. So I'm going to pull this out, get rid of this, run tests. You see how did set is the conditional part is shrinking. And now we get Swifty and say, well, this is a little different from these other cases because it's converting the current price into this thing by prepending the currency in a bad way. Like I said, don't actually do this in production code. You don't use NS currency, whatever it is. And this is where, if you are a smarter person than I am, which you probably are, you can probably write out the functional code right away. In fact, maybe you could have done all of this in one step. And that is the strong temptation by lots of people, is to make all sorts of changes in one giant step and see at the very end if it still works. The advantage of working in small verified steps is I take a step and I see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I revert. The other advantage is that I can commit this to the main branch. I can push it up and into production code without disrupting anybody because I know everything still works. Anyway, let's come back here and finish up this example. We want to say, take the current price, which may or may not exist, and I only know this because I've tried this. Okay, so we want to map a decimal into something else. So we can do that with a transform where we say, and now I'll take this string, replace that with that. I think this is correct. Now, as I was saying, you're probably smarter than I am, and you can do this in one step. I'm not as bright, but I don't have to be, and neither do your coworkers. We can say, okay, this old code, it works, but there's a much cleaner way to express it in Swift using functional programming. And we can get there incrementally by making it work and then cleaning it up and separating those things. So you don't have to be a super perfect Swift programmer. I'm not. I rely on the tests to tell me whether or not what I've done works or not. So let's also get rid of the return here and change this into a one-liner. And this will be the last thing that we do. All right. Let me wrap up. Some things about what I've shown you. First, let me summarize some things. In order to do this kind of refactoring, you need tests. Now, what do you do if your code doesn't have tests? Well, then you need to add tests. But sometimes in order to add tests, you need to do refactoring to make it testable. Then what do? The answer is then you rely on manual testing, and that's okay. You pay the price for that because you don't want to keep doing that every time. You're making it testable so that you can, you're making it testable so that you can add unit tests so that you don't have to do it manually every time. Another thing is it's super essential to have fast turnaround time for this kind of workflow. You may have looked at this and thought, there's no way my code builds and runs tests that fast. Couple ways to deal with this. One is sort of the short-term solution is to say, well, then I'm not going to run tests every step. I'm going to aggregate steps. I'm going to take a step, take a step, take a step, take a step, and then run tests. Okay, so that's the quick pragmatic solution of what to do. The larger problem, and challenge to you is, well, then reduce that time. Find ways to break it down. Suggestion is don't build your whole app. Work only in part of your app by breaking your app into smaller frameworks or libraries so that you can test each thing without building your whole freaking app. And I think that's my nice segue, hopefully, into Jeroen's talk. Finally, what to repeat what I tried to say is that the general meta pattern of refactoring is lay down a new thing, make sure it builds, switch things over one at a time, or if you can do it in a global search and replace, that's fine. But switch things over and make sure the tests pass. And then get rid of the old thing if it's still hanging around. And that is the essential nuts and bolts of refactoring done properly and what I wanted to show to you. Before I hand off to Jeroen, one final reminder. This is available, iOS unit testing by example. All right. Thank you very much. And I hope this was interesting and useful. And I really hope that I get to come back to Amsterdam and hang out with you folks. All right.